Hello and welcome. This is Beriathan of the Citadel Guard of Gondor, and today I bring you a video that it's a little bit different from what I usually do. So this story begins when I was doing some missions in Gundabad, and one player by the name of Nostalgia reached out to me saying that, well, they were following the channel and were a big fan, but they had a question about my LOTRO settings because even though they had a quite powerful PC, they weren't able to make the game look as good as my videos show, and there were some frame drops here and there is also some performance issues as well, and they were asking for assistance in that regard. So today I thought I would show you my LOTRO settings, and I will give you also some of the tips and troubleshooting things I've done to avoid frame drops as much as possible. The game, of course, still has well, it's an old game, so these things happens every once in a while, but I've been able to reduce them quite a lot with just a few simple fixes. So first things first, I would first share with you my build so that you get an idea of what I'm using to run the game, and then you can compare with your own build, and that way you will see if you are up or below mine and adjust accordingly. Of course, the game doesn't need a lot of resources to run, so even if you have a PC that is not as good as mine, you would still be able to get good results. And I don't have a top-end PC anyways, so there's still a lot of leeway in this regard. So first of all, what I have is on the graphics card, I have an RTX 2060, the regular one with 6 GB of VRAM, and then on the CPU I have a Ryzen 5 3600. I don't remember the full specs of that, but well, you can check that online as well. 12 threads and 6 cores if I'm not mistaken. And on the RAM side, I have 16 gigs of RAM. So as you see, it's, well, once again, not top of the line, but it's a good enough PC, medium range, I would say. And definitely way more than LOTRO needs to run properly. So keep that in mind when you are comparing your settings to mine. On the other hand, the first thing that I've seen most people recommend is to install LOTRO on an SSD instead of a regular hard drive, because there is a big difference in loading times and performance by just doing that, moving to the SSD instead of a regular hard drive. That will improve your performance quite a lot. Now, I've also seen some other recommendations on the old forums that I wasn't able to find, but there was a very similar post on the new forums talking about two different things that you can do also to improve your performance. First one of all is run the game in compatibility mode for Windows 8. That's something that I particularly haven't done, and I haven't run with any issues, but if you're having some issues, that might be something worth checking out. And the other thing is, don't install your LOTRO game on your system drive, because that can cause issues with antiviruses and admin rights as well. And once again, for my part, that is something that I have not run with. I haven't had any issues on that kind, but those two things are something that is worth checking out. So let me pull up that forum post for you so that you can check that out. You can see here they are talking about both things. So setting the game for Windows 8 compatibility mode on the XE, and that can help with some issues. And the other one is don't install on program files, because In this case, Norton Antivirus was getting upset at LOTRO playing around in program files and start eyeballing the client and what the client did, and was affecting the performance of the game. So once again, I haven't done any of this myself. You might not need to do that either, but it's worth checking out. If you're having issues with your antivirus, maybe try installing LOTRO on a different folder. Even if you have your Windows files installed on your SSD, if you don't have another one, you can still install LOTRO on a different folder and still get the benefits of an SSD install. And if you wanna give that a try, you can also set your game for Windows 8 compatibility mode. So if you're not sure how that's done, you just go to your desktop, forget all my icons. I know it's a mess, but what you need to do is go here to Lord of the Rings Online, Properties, and here in compatibility mode, you just check this and select Windows 8, and that should be it. That on one hand. On the other hand, I lost my desktop. God. On the other hand, before we get to look at the settings proper, there is one last thing that it's important to know. And I'm gonna show this in case there's somebody here that doesn't know how to get to this. But you basically on your desktop want to right click, go to your display settings. And here it will on one hand show your display resolution, which in my case is 1920 by 1080. But you can also go here to advanced display settings to double check your monitor's refresh rate, which as you can see here is 60,000 Hz. You can change that here on the settings, but unless you know exactly what is the refresh rate of your monitor, I wouldn't advise you to tinker with these settings, because usually the default setting is the one that you should be going with. Once again, unless you know what you're doing, I don't advise touching this at all. And you need these two settings, these two pieces of information before you go into the game, because there are a couple things that we need to check. Now we go to the settings proper. So you can, well, go to your settings, go into the menu and options, or you can just press Ctrl O, and then here we go. You can use this key in here, this button, to detect optimal settings, and the game will do a fairly good job at checking what your specs are and choosing the right settings for it. But in my experience, even when you have a good enough PC, you can go even higher than what the game recommends. So that's why you see here that my graphic quality is custom, because I have tinkered with this a little bit. For the graphics hardware level, I would advise you to go with DX11. It would allow you to enable many eye candy effects that might affect your performance, but they look really good. And if you are aiming for the best visual quality possible, then you need to go with DX11. If you're having performance issues, then you can drop to DX10 or DX9, and that would help, but you will also miss some of these graphic effects that we'll see in just a moment. Now here we have the PVMP performance override. This claims to only affect PVMP areas. I don't go there a lot, but I still have that checked just in case, because you never know. For the screen mode, I would advise you to go full screen windowed. If you go regular full screen, then you will need to pick your resolution, and then you will need to match this resolution with the resolution that we saw earlier on the system settings. But if you choose full screen windowed, the game will do that for you. You don't need to worry about that. Aspect ratio, once again, you can leave that at auto, because that will be dependent on what you choose on your resolution and what the game chooses. Anti-aliasing, I go with a higher setting, 8 times. Anti-aliasing doesn't affect performance too much from what I remember, and it does. You can notice the difference if we disable this. Oh god, I was playing with some reshade in here. But you can see some jagged edges in here, especially on the shoulders. It's more noticeable, and on the gloves as well. But we can go to 8 times the anti-aliasing, and that's gonna be it. Now, these few settings that we have in here are to your heart's content. That depends on your monitor settings and what you think looks good. Anything you choose in here, it's gonna work. Depends once again on your own PC. But for ambient light, I go at 0.50. So that is sort of a middle ground for me. If you go to 0, some areas are too dark, but if you go to 1, some areas are too bright. So I just go the middle point and call it a day. Brightness, contrast, and gamma level I have just left at 1, which is the default setting, because I am quite happy with what I have in here. Now, to the meat and potatoes of all this, when we go to advanced graphics, there are a lot of settings in here. Basically, I have all these as high as it can go. Object draw distance goes to ultra high. Model detail goes to ultra high. Material detail goes to high. Scenery landscape draw distance goes to very high. So that this is for you to be able to see objects from greater distances. So that you avoid popping objects as you move through the world. Frill distance ultra high, frill density to 1, and distant imposters. You can disable this to increase performance. Once again, we're going with the highest visual quality that we can do. All this is basically to avoid popping as you approach new areas in the game. But these distant imposters, if I remember correctly, will provide you with some 2D objects on the distance so that you can see still without affecting performance too much. Atmospherics detail we have at high. The X11 interactive water I also have at high. Once again, you need the X11 for this one. This is one of the first settings that you will see here that needs the X11 to be able to run. So if we go to the river in here, we can check that one really quick. And basically what this does is when you get into the water, you can see your character leaving this sort of trail behind, which is not that visible today for whatever reason, but I mean, there are some other places in which it is even more noticeable than this, but you basically need this to leave particles behind when you interact with water, which is a really nice detail in my opinion, and definitely worth going for. But you need, once again, the X11 for this. Now for textures, texture detail goes to very high, texture filtering goes to very sharp, and depending on the filtering that you choose, you might need to tinker with the anisotropic filter quality. So once again, we can check this by linear, which is a little bit softer, trilinear, don't see a lot of difference in there, sharp, very sharp, which is the one I run, or you can go with anisotropic, but the reason behind my choice really is just once again a cosmetic one that is linked with the outfit that I use, because you see here there is some chainmail in the outfit. But even if you go to anisotropic at max quality or any other setting, the chainmail really doesn't look as good. But if you go to very sharp, it is you can see the details in there a lot more than just any other filter quality in there. So that's why I go with very sharp, but this one you can change depending on what you think looks best. And now for lightning, we go high quality lightning, specular lightning, glow mapping, if we disable this, oh god, that looks terrible. You see there on the distance per pixel lighting attenuation that was introduced fairly recently, I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, specular lightning. You can see there some, what's the definition of this? Shiny surfaces, that's what we have. Surface reflections and landscape lighting quality. Surface reflections, especially for things like water. I love the reflections in this game and how things are reflected in water, so I would never go without it. And landscape lighting quality also at very high, ultra high. This is as high as it can go. And here we have another special setting, DX10, distant landscape lighting. That changes a little bit how things are seen there in the distance. Landscape shadows at high, blob shadows enabled. You can disable this to increase performance. But I don't see a lot of difference in here. When more detailed shadows are not available, so that's not the case right now. Stencil shadows is ultra high, and environment stencil shadows, it's also enabled. Once again, you can disable this to increase performance, and at least right now you cannot see that much of a difference, but there is some. DX10 dynamic shadows, once again, you need at least DX10 for this. And oh my god, tinkering with the settings with Reshade enable is not playing well, but you can see here what happens when we disable this or when we enable this. God, please stop. Anyway, DX11 ambient occlusion. So disabling this will improve performance, and you can see the ambient occlusion in place in the fence and some of the bushes. Dynamic particle rendering is enabled for all targets. So you can have some leeway in here, just you and your targets, only your targets, none at all. I have it at all. Static environmental objects and precipitation effects both are enabled. These will help you with things like rain and snow. And this will improve rendering performance if you disable this in areas with many particle effects. But this helps with things such as braziers and lanterns. But since there are none in here, we cannot appreciate the difference. Post-processing effects is also a big one that enables many of these other settings that we have seen, so I would advise you to have this on. A volumetric sunlight, glow mapping, over bright bloom filter, all this is enabled. Blur filter quality is at high, bloom intensity is at 1, which is the default setting. Once again, you can play with this a little bit depending on what you think looks best. I go with the default one, no big deal in here. And here we start seeing some of the performance related settings. We have player mesh combining. This requires extra system and video memory, so you can disable this to improve performance, free up some resources, because this is to render distant players faster and giving you more characters on screen at once, especially if you are running festivals or player run events where a lot of people go. You might need to play with this if you're having issues. Avatar update visible where I'm running human characters, so this setting doesn't do anything at all for human characters. It used to do, not anymore. If we disable this, we get some nightmare fuel. No, it did get you some nightmare fuel on Ball Rotor, but no longer. If you're running elves or hobbits or dwarves, you might want to play with this. Some people prefer the original avatar models. I always had this checked, but it is once again a matter of preference. Avatar texture compositing, and once again to free up some memory, especially in crowded areas. But I have never faced any issues with this, so I leave it on, and I don't see any difference in here. 3D object portraits is just for immersion, in my opinion. I really like that one a lot. We have texture cache size. So using a higher setting may reduce load times and improve performance if your computer has enough memory to be able to handle this. If you lower this setting, if you don't have enough memory in your system, it will improve performance as it will give the memory to other processes that need it most. And we also have player crowd quality. This controls the graphics quality of characters and scenery when a large number of players are nearby. So you lower this to get a lower setting. It improves rendering performance in crowded areas. But once again, we have all this cranked to the max because my PC can handle it. And that way you don't see a change in quality when you get to an area with lots of players. Now, this is one of the big ones to avoid frame drops. On your display, you need to make sure that your refresh rate in here matches what we saw on the system settings earlier. And I will get to that in just a moment. There are many different places in the settings in which you can adjust this. And to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure which one takes priority over which one. So I basically enable this every other place you can find this. As in this one, sync to refresh rate, this will make it so that it will match the refresh rate of your monitor. So this will eliminate horizontal tearing at the expense of some performance. This only works when running in full screen mode. So once again, you need to go back here. Since we're running windowed, it doesn't affect anything, so not a big deal in here. And this one, as you can see here, is recommended to leave this setting disabled, and it only works in full screen mode anyway, so no big deal for me right now. It uses more video memory resources and it might improve your frame rate, but as you have seen, it is recommended for you to leave unchecked. Now here there are some settings that you can play with if you are still having some performance issues. On your UI settings, you can, for example, in here, you can choose some names if you are having issues with text. This is not something that I have played with, but this special effects option, if you're really scrapping for frames and for performance, you can disable this and it will help. When I had my original PC, every time I went to rating, I had to disable all this because otherwise I would lag a lot. So combat hit effects, avatar attack effects, monster attack effects, blood effects, dread effects, and weapon passive effects. All these can put a strain on your system, especially if you don't have enough memory, so you might want to play with this if you are still having issues. Now here the panels displays a web store, your UI, your layout. None of these would affect your performance as far as I know. Only these special effects that we saw in here. And once again, this is just for personal preference. This wouldn't affect the visual quality too much, but let me show you these settings really quick. These toolbar slots is so that you can customize what quick access you get in here. I haven't touched the left side at all. This is the default one. But as you can see here, I can access my mail, my plugins, the allegiances, my housing, the old legendary item panel that I no longer need. I should change this maybe. And a quick exit in case I need this. And you can also customize the icons on the left by going in here, the toolbar left and the toolbar right. Floating names, the text size, the opacity, and what gets toggled with floating names. NPCs, player pets, my pet names. You know, I should maybe be playing with some of these. If I'm aiming for a more immersive video. Okay, that's interesting. I might need to check this later. The special effects that we have seen, the tooltip delay, and if you are placing tooltips in the game, once again, this doesn't affect visual quality. And these for the panels, this is just going to the settings really quick. If you want to check this as well, you might want to pause the video if you are interested in some of the settings. But since we are focused on visual quality and performance, we are going through this kind of quickly. And the scale of some of your UI elements. Now for combat options, auto target enemies, skills that can enable auto attack, you might want to disable this for some raids. Skill buttons target the nearest enemy. Skill target forwarding, that's a big one. When checked, you will attempt to execute your skills on your target's target if the original target is not valid. That's very useful, especially for healers and some tanking too. Yeah, that helps for tanking as well. If you are trying to get aggro quickly, instead of cycling through the ads, you can just target your the ally that you want to get aggro on, and if your ally has the mob targeted, you can select the mob that you want quicker. This is a really nice one. Enable skill mischance penalties while moving. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. That adds some layer of realism in my opinion. I like that one. Show the vitals of your selection's target. Directional selection indicator. Some clutter on screen if you ask me. It will add some color arrows on screen and yeah, some clutter in there. Combo particle response indicators. Display companion orders in chat window. Combat state break notices in chat window. That might be a good one. Assist. Optional combat animations and combat animation blending. That does affect visual quality a little bit because it will make for a smoother, more fluid experience as you are fighting in any scenario. Movement assistance in combat. Well, that's up to you if you want to get that assistance. Persistent area effect visualization so that you can see the hotspots whenever the mobs drop them, which helps a lot for your spatial awareness. Worsted auto slowdown, I don't like that one. I prefer to slow my worsted on my own, but once again, that's up to you. Social requests. This can affect performance as well. These affect display options. If you are having issues in here, you can check only show effects cast by you and only show dispellable effects on your fellowship so that you can see if you need to remove some debuffs like wounds and fears and that kind of thing. And on your selection, only show the effects cast by you to reduce some of the clutter, and that reduces the strain on the engine. So you might want to play with this if you're having issues, and if you are still having performance issues, you can also disable cosmetic pets, and it will reduce the clutter on your screen and improve your performance just a little bit. Here are my chat settings. I don't think this affects anything, and you just need to tinker this to your heart's content. Your quick slots as well. I have up to bar 4. I have not docked them. But is that up to you if you want to lock your quick slot bars to avoid accidentally moving some of your skills. Your input. This is for the sensitivity and the smoothing of your mouse, but as far as I know, that doesn't affect performance at all. Reset camera when moving. Oh. Some of these are a matter of personal preference. If you want to invert your mouse y-axis, if you want to reset your camera while moving, for example, this one. Oh, that might help. But since I have my auto center on a key mapping, it's not that necessary for me. Camera aligns to slopes so that you don't need to move your camera, especially if you are climbing really steep hills and mountains. That might help. Once again, I have this mapped to some of my keys, so it's not that necessary for me. And X input detection if you are using a controller, but as you can see, it can affect performance. I have never played LOTRO with a controller. Not worth it in my opinion. My key mapping, we have talked about this a little bit. I basically have this mapped so that I have all my quick slots available on my keyboard, plus some extra utilities like the camera controls. This is another topic entirely different, but if you're interested in seeing how I have my key mapping set up, I can show that to you on another video. And here on my troubleshooting, once again, I set the maximum frame rate to 60 frames per second because once again, we are matching what we saw on the system settings. So it goes on a 1-to-1 ratio. If your refresh rate is 60,000 Hz, then your maximum frame rate that your monitor can display is 60 frames per second, and anything that goes above that will or has the potential of affecting your performance. That's what happened to me. I had this set as a max, so basically unlimited, and that happened to me on the advanced graphics as well. If you set this to auto, it will also, I believe, will use it will use a safe refresh rate for your display configuration. But if you go to a troubleshoot in here and set it to max, it will just give you as many FPS as you can get. But the issue in there is that the game will try to render more frames than you can handle on your monitor, and that's what causes some stuttering. It used to cause stuttering for me, and it also used to make my fans on my case go crazy consistently. Every 5 to 10 minutes you will hear my fans just firing up as fast as they could go. But as soon as I started enabling these frame rate limits, that went away, because now the game is just running at 60 FPS, which is what my monitor can handle. So it's not trying to show you more than what your monitor can do. It's basically worthless if you are, for example, running 70, 90, or even 100 FPS, like what used to happen to me, when your monitor can only render 60. So you are just putting a lot of strain on your game that really is not going anywhere. So that's the big one for me. If you are still having performance issues, even if you know your PC can handle this, you need to set up your frame limits, your refresh rate. So 60 Hz, sync to refresh rate, and then on the troubleshooting, matching your refresh rate according to what you see in your system settings. Now for the engine speed, at the highest setting, the game runs as fast as it can. Lower settings can be used to help troubleshoot random system crashes and freezes. It's been a long while since I had a system crash, so I don't worry too much about it, and I go as high as it can go. And for the connection speed, once again, automatic. Not entirely sure how to play with this one, so it's better to leave it at that and let the game handle it. Now, if you're having random freezes and graphics, I would also advise you to come back here and check if you are maybe running in full screen instead of full screen windowed. Because what happens with full screen, especially if you only have one monitor setup, but you still try to check different things, like for example, you're going to the wiki or you're going to Discord and you are switching windows constantly. If you are running full screen, at least the last time I did it, the game used to crash and to freeze a lot. And that doesn't happen when you are running full screen windowed. Not entirely sure how this works behind the scenes, but running full screen windowed improves the stability of the game by a lot. So that's a basic rundown of my settings. Basically, anti-aliasing at 8, these color settings to your heart's content, your resolution and your refresh rate synced to your monitor, DX11, advanced graphics as high as they can go, all of them. And then if you're having issues, you can go to UI settings to it's halfway through, special effects option, and same here in the social options, the effect display options, you can play with those if you are still having performance issues. But once again, my recommendation, go here to troubleshoot and set your maximum frame rate, as well as in your display advanced settings. And that is basically it for my graphical settings. That's what I get to run the game as high as it can go. And as you have seen throughout the video, I've been playing with some Reshade settings. I'm not a big fan of Reshade, at least not on LOTRO. I think the vanilla game looks good enough for me, but I know some people like to play with this, and I downloaded a Reshade preset that gives a little bit better clarity, but what you gain on the landscape, you lose on the skybox. The skybox looks a little bit mottled, a little bit paler, and I love the skies in the game. So well, once again, this one goes to your heart content if you prefer the original or if you prefer to go with a Reshade. And this is that Reshade that I can link his tutorial on the description if you want to check this one out. He went to Reddit a couple months ago, and a lot of people seemed to like what he had done, so he went to YouTube and uploaded his Reshade settings so everybody else could replicate them. I don't know, maybe at night this might work a little bit better. I don't know. For the most part, I prefer to go with Reshade. And the thing is, if you're running Reshade, that does affect your performance as well. So depending on your PC specs, you might want to or not go with some of these Reshade settings. But once again, that was it for my settings. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you learned something useful, if you saw something in here that helped you improve your own game quality and performance. And let me know if you would like to see some more videos like this, like for example my key mapping, which I am a big fan of, as you can imagine. And as you saw at the start of the video, this was a request by a viewer that was able to find me on Arkenstone. If you have any other recommendation for a video, you can leave that one on the comments down below, or you can reach out to me on Arkenstone through a mail or through a private message, and we can have a good chat. So once again, to Nostalgia V for suggesting today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you find it helpful. I hope you were able to improve your own game. And for the meantime, that is all I have for today. I will see you on the next one. But until then, stay safe, take care. Good luck to you all, and I will see you later.